Rain poured like punishment from the sky. Jason clutched his daughter's tiny hand as they stepped into the fast food diner, soaked, cold, and 2 hours late for her birthday dinner. He didn't have balloons, he didn't have cake, but he had $12, enough for 2 kids' meals and a cup of coffee. Behind them, sitting alone in the corner booth, was a woman with trembling hands and hollow eyes. Her clothes were expensive, but her fingers shook as she clutched her stomach like it hadn't known food in days. Jason noticed. He watched, and despite every dollar counting, he ordered 3 meals. He placed one in front of the woman without a word, just a tired smile. "Why?" she asked, voice cracking. Jason glanced down at his daughter, who was already splitting her fries in half, offering some to the stranger, because no one should go hungry with a kid watching. She looked up at him, stunned. What Jason didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that he had just fed someone with the power to change his life forever. But fate had one more test waiting for him first. The rain was relentless, a cold, unforgiving downpour that turned the streets into rivers, blurring the neon lights of the city into watercolor streaks. Jason's coat was soaked through, the fabric clinging to his tired frame. His small hand gripped tight around Lily's, his 6-year-old daughter, who shivered silently beneath her too thin jacket. They slipped through the creaking door of the dingy diner, the warmth inside a sharp contrast to the biting chill outside. Jason's eyes scanned the cramped room. Empty booths, flickering fluorescent lights, and the faint smell of burnt coffee filled the air. He settled into a corner booth, pulling Lily close and wrapping his arm protectively around her. She looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes that seemed too big for such a little face. "We'll make it special," he whispered, trying to mask the desperation in his voice. "Birthday dinner, just us." Jason reached into his pocket, counting. The last $12 he had left, enough for 2 kids' meals and a coffee. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted her. A woman, alone in the far booth, hunched over, her hands trembling as she clutched an empty coffee cup. Her designer coat was wrinkled and stained, her face pale and drawn. Hunger and exhaustion radiated from her like a shadow. Jason hesitated, heart pounding. The clock was ticking, his money was running low, and yet, something stirred inside him. He flagged down the waitress and, with a quiet resolve, ordered 1 more meal. He slid the plate across the table to the woman without a word. She looked up, confusion and gratitude mingling in her eyes. "Why?" she asked softly. Jason's gaze drifted to Lily, who was already breaking her fries in half. "Because no one should have to eat alone," he said. But what Jason didn't know was that the stranger was someone who held the power to change his life forever, and fate was just beginning to turn its wheels. Jason wiped the rain from his face as he stepped through the narrow door of the school gymnasium turned community center. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, mixing with the distant chatter of children playing in the hallway. He wore a worn janitor's apron over his threadbare shirt, the faint scent of cleaning chemicals clinging to him like a second skin. At 35, Jason's broad shoulders bore the weight of years spent serving his country, and now barely scraping by in civilian life. His hands were calloused, evidence of late-night shifts scrubbing floors while the world slept. He glanced down at the photo taped inside his wallet. Lily, smiling bright with a missing front tooth, holding a crumpled balloon. Her joy was his compass. His mind drifted to the army base, where the buzz of helicopters and the smell of diesel had once been a backdrop to camaraderie and purpose. Those days felt distant, like another life. The medals he'd earned were hidden away in a box, forgotten under years of paperwork and heartbreak. The job wasn't glamorous. The pay barely covered rent. But every night, after the school halls emptied, Jason would mop floors with a tired but determined heart. His daughter's laughter was the light that pushed him forward. He had left the military, not by choice, but by circumstance. Wounded, invisible to the system that once promised him a future. Now he was just a single dad, working double shifts to keep the lights on and food on the table. Jason tightened his grip on the mop handle and took a deep breath. Tomorrow, he told himself, would be better. But deep down, he wondered how many more tomorrows like this he could survive. The house was quiet, too quiet. The walls echoed with memories, the laughter of a family that once was. Jason sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the faded photo on his nightstand. Him, his wife Emily, and their little boy, Noah, all smiles under a summer sun. That was before the accident, the day his world shattered. Noah was only 3 when a reckless driver ran a red light. Jason remembered the sirens, the frantic hospital waiting room, the moment the doctor's voice cracked as he told them Noah hadn't made it. Emily couldn't bear it. The light in her eyes dimmed and then went out altogether. Slowly, piece by piece, she slipped away, first from him, then from their home. She left a note, a brief apology wrapped in pain, saying she needed to find herself again. Jason was left holding the fragments of their broken family. Just him and Lily now. Some nights he would lie awake, haunted by the silence that Noah's absence left behind. The guilt was a heavy chain around his heart. He blamed himself for not being there, but his daughter needed him every morning. Jason forced himself out of bed, pushing past the ache. He vowed to be strong for Lily, to keep the promise he whispered on Noah's grave, that he would protect his family no matter what. Yet, the fear of losing everything again was a shadow that never left. Jason clenched his fists, swallowed the pain, and whispered, "We'll get through this." Because in that moment, he had no choice but to believe it. It was a morning painted in shades of gray. The kitchen smelled faintly of cold coffee and burnt toast. Jason stood at the sink, scrubbing a stubborn stain on a chipped plate while Lily's small fingers traced circles on the table. Emily's suitcase sat by the door, half-packed, silent testimony to the fracture no one wanted to admit. She appeared in the doorway, eyes red-rimmed and hollow. Jason's heart clenched at the sight. This wasn't the woman he married. The woman who once dreamed aloud about forever. "I can't do this anymore," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Jason swallowed the lump in his throat, searching her face for a flicker of hope, but found only exhaustion. "It's not just the loss," Emily continued. "It's everything. The silence. The pain. I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know how to swim anymore." Lily looked up, confused, clutching a rag doll tightly. Jason reached out but hesitated. "I love you both," Emily said, "but I need to leave to find myself again." Jason's world crumbled in slow motion. He watched her walk out, suitcase dragging across the floor, the sound echoing in the empty house. The door clicked shut, a sound more final than any scream. He dropped to his knees, pulling Lily close as she whimpered softly. "No more leaving," he promised. But deep down, Jason knew this was just the beginning of a long, lonely road. A road he would have to walk alone for Lily's sake, and his own. Jason sat on the creaky second-hand couch in their tiny apartment, the evening sun casting long shadows across peeling wallpaper. Lily sat beside him, her head resting on his shoulder, clutching the threadbare stuffed bear her mother had given her once. The silence between them was thick, filled with the weight of what they'd lost and the uncertain path ahead. Bills lay scattered on the coffee table, overdue notices, eviction warnings. Jason's paycheck barely covered rent, let alone groceries. Yet somehow he forced a smile. "Want to hear a story?" he asked, brushing a stray curl from Lily's forehead. She nodded, eyes bright despite the hardships. He told her about the stars he'd seen during his military tours, vast, endless skies filled with hope and courage. "Even when things get tough," he said softly, "we can still find light." But nights were the hardest. When Lily finally fell asleep, Jason's mind raced how to stretch every dollar, how to keep food on the table, how to be both mom and dad. The world outside didn't slow for them. Neighbors whispered, Landlords. Knocked. The social worker's warnings lingered in his ears. Yet in the midst of despair, Jason learned to breathe again, one moment at a time. He found strength in small victories. Lily's laughter over a shared meal. Her tiny hand gripping his as they crossed the street. Her whispered, "I love you." Dad before bedtime. They were broken, but not defeated. And Jason vowed to fight with every ounce of himself for Lily, for their future. The fluorescent lights of the veteran's office flickered overhead as Jason sat in the stiff plastic chair, clutching a thin envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter he had been waiting for weeks, a response to his plea for assistance. He unfolded it slowly, heart pounding with a fragile hope. But the words inside crushed him. "Your application is denied due to missing documentation." Jason's throat tightened. Missing documentation. A simple bureaucratic phrase that meant the difference between a roof over their heads and the cold streets outside. He glanced around the sterile room, faces worn by their own battles, some more broken than he felt. "How can I get it if they never gave it to me?" He muttered under his breath, the helplessness sinking in. His mind flashed back to the military base, lost papers, misfiled records, endless red tape. The weight of the system's indifference pressed down on him, suffocating like the rain against his apartment windows. Lily tugged at his sleeve, her small voice breaking through the fog. "Daddy, will we be okay?" Jason forced a smile, swallowing the bitter lump in his chest. "We will," he said softly. But the lie tasted like ash. That day, he realized the world was not built for men like him, men who fought silent battles off the battlefield, men left behind by promises made and forgotten. But even as the system turned its back, Jason's resolve hardened. They could deny him paperwork, but they couldn't deny him his fight. Jason sat stiffly across from the social worker, a clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. Her eyes were cold, professional, unreadable. "We've received complaints about your living conditions," she said bluntly, voice clipped. "If things don't improve, Lily may be placed in foster care." The words hit Jason like a punch to the gut. His heart thundered in his chest. Foster care. The very thought was unbearable. He glanced down at Lily, who sat quietly on the worn couch, clutching her doll as if it were a lifeline. "I'm doing everything I can," Jason said, voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "I'm working 2 jobs, paying rent, feeding my daughter." The social worker's gaze didn't soften. "The regulations are clear. You're in violation if you can't provide a stable home." Jason stood abruptly, knocking over a chair. "Stable? You think this is easy for me?" His voice cracked with raw frustration. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm fighting every day just to keep my family together." Tears welled in Lily's eyes, and Jason's resolve broke for a moment. The social worker softened just a fraction, but the damage was done. Jason knew the system was not designed for fathers like him, single, struggling, unseen. He left the office that day, feeling more invisible than ever. But beneath the despair, a fire ignited. If the system wouldn't help, he would fight no matter the cost. Jason's hands trembled as he wiped the sweat from his brow in the dimly lit warehouse where he worked the night shift. The hum of machines and the clang of metal echoed around him, but his mind was elsewhere, on Lily, on rent, on the unpaid bills piling up at home. That night, a coworker collapsed nearby, clutching his chest. Jason rushed over without hesitation, calling emergency services and staying by his side until help arrived. But the kindness didn't go unnoticed by management. The next morning, Jason was called into the manager's cramped office. The air was thick with tension. "We appreciate your concern," the manager said coldly, "but you're on a tight schedule. This kind of delay is unacceptable." Jason's stomach dropped. "I was helping the man who needed it," he said, voice steady but defiant. "Company policy is clear. We can't afford distractions." 2 days later, Jason was handed his termination letter. He packed his few belongings silently, the weight of injustice pressing down on him. Outside, the world felt colder, darker, but Jason refused to let bitterness consume him. He thought of Lily's smile, the reason he fought every day, and swallowed the knot in his throat. He didn't have much, but what he did have was courage, and sometimes that was enough to keep going. The afternoon sun filtered through the cracked blinds as Jason rummaged through an old cardboard box buried beneath stacks of forgotten belongings. Dust swirled in the stale air of the storage room, settling on his fingers as he pulled out faded letters, brittle photographs, and scraps of paper yellowed with time. He paused, heart skipping as he unfolded a creased document, his military discharge papers, long thought lost. The edges were worn, but the words were clear. Honorable discharge. Commendations for bravery. His eyes lingered on the name signed at the bottom, a name that once held pride and promise. For years, those papers had been buried beneath life's chaos, forgotten in the wake of loss, struggle, and survival. Jason clutched the documents tightly, a bittersweet surge rising in his chest. This was a reminder of who he had been and who he could still be. He glanced around the empty room, imagining the weight those words might carry if anyone else saw them. No one had ever asked. No one had ever noticed the man beneath the janitor's apron, the father fighting battles no one else could see. A sudden knock startled him. Lily's voice floated up the stairs. "Daddy, can we play?" Jason smiled, folding the papers carefully. "Coming, sweetheart." In that moment, buried in forgotten paper, Jason found a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, his past wasn't a burden, it was a key. The school cafeteria buzzed with chatter and clattering trays as children lined up, eager for their midday meal. Jason stood outside the glass doors, heart sinking, watching Lily walk hesitantly toward the lunch line. Her small frame dwarfed by taller kids, she clutched a crumpled lunch slip, an unpaid balance written in red ink. As she reached the counter, the cafeteria worker's eyes flicked to the slip and then to Lily's hopeful face. "I'm sorry, sweetie, but you can't get lunch today," the worker said quietly but firmly. Lily's eyes widened and a wave of shame flushed her cheeks. She looked around. The laughter and whispers felt like daggers. Jason felt his chest tighten. He wanted to storm in, to grab Lily and shield her from the humiliation, but he stayed frozen, swallowed by helplessness. Tears pricked at the corners of Lily's eyes. She quickly turned and slipped away, hiding behind a pillar to wipe them away. Jason's jaw clenched. That night he lay awake, replaying the scene over and over, her embarrassment, her silence. "I won't let this happen again," he whispered into the darkness. The weight of poverty wasn't just numbers. It was the invisible wounds left on his daughter's heart. And Jason knew this fight wasn't just about money, it was about dignity. And he was determined to restore both, no matter what it took. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the quiet janitor's closet as Jason wiped down a dusty shelf. The evening shift dragged on, each minute heavier than the last. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and in stepped a woman dressed in a sleek, tailored suit, carrying an air of quiet authority. Jason blinked in surprise. It was her, the stranger from the diner, the woman he had fed without knowing her story. She smiled softly, eyes tired but unmistakably grateful. "I never forgot what you did," she said, voice steady yet gentle. Jason paused, unsure how to respond. "I just didn't want you to be hungry," she nodded. "I was at a low point, homeless, exhausted, hungry. That meal saved me in more ways than you know." The woman extended her hand. "My name is Claire." Jason shook it, the warmth in her grip surprising him. "I wanted to find you to say thank you." For a moment, the world outside the janitor's closet seemed to fade away. Two strangers connected by a simple act of kindness. Jason's eyes darted to the floor. "It's been tough, but I'm holding on." Claire's gaze softened. "I think we can help each other." As she turned to leave, she paused. "Tomorrow, my office. 9 o'clock. Jason watched her go, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. That night, for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe something better might be possible. The glass walls of the sleek office reflected the city skyline as Jason stepped inside, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Claire sat behind a polished desk, her expression calm but intense. "Do you remember me?" she asked, eyes searching his face. Jason blinked, the memory flooding back the diner. The meal, the kindness. "I do," he said softly. Claire leaned forward. "I'm the CEO of a food technology company," she revealed, voice steady but vulnerable. 3 days ago, I was homeless. I hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. Jason's eyes widened in disbelief. "I kept my situation private because I was afraid of losing everything, the reputation, the trust of my board." She sighed. "But your kindness reminded me that even the strongest people need help sometimes." Jason swallowed, emotions swirling inside him. Claire stood, walking around the desk. "I want to offer you a job, not charity, but a partnership. Someone who understands hunger, struggle, and the fight to keep going." Jason's mind raced. Could this be real? "I don't want pity," he said quietly. "I want to provide for my daughter." Claire smiled. "And you will. Together, we can make sure no child goes hungry like Lily did." For the first time in years, Jason felt the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. Hope wasn't just a dream. It was a promise. The first morning sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Claire's office, illuminating the sleek conference table where Jason sat, nervously smoothing his hands over the rough fabric of his jacket. It was a world away from the janitor's closet, from the cramped apartment where he and Lily had survived on scraps and hope. Claire stood beside him, a quiet force of encouragement. "This isn't charity," she said firmly. "It's a second chance when you've earned." Jason glanced around, absorbing the hum of innovation and ambition that filled the room. He thought of Lily's bright eyes, the way she split her fries with a stranger, the promise he'd made to protect her. For the first time, he felt like he was on the edge of something real. Claire handed him a folder filled with proposals, plans to expand their mission to feed struggling families, starting with schools like Lily's. Jason's voice trembled as he spoke. "I want to be part of this. Not just for us, but for every kid who's hungry and scared." The weight of responsibility settled on him, but it wasn't heavy. It was a mantle he was ready to carry. As the days passed, Jason threw himself into the work, learning, growing, fighting to make the impossible possible.